Good morning. Good morning. Welcome. This is the 2016 NASA Ames Summer Series, which is sponsored by our Chief Scientist Office, and also our Women's Influence Network is helping to co-sponsor this special event today. Today's presentation, which is entitled How to Create a Social Movement, is going to be given by our wonderful guest speaker, Ms. Elizabeth Nyamayaro. She is the Senior Advisor to the Undersecretary General and the Global Head for the HeForShe initiative. This is a global solidarity movement which seeks to engage men and boys as advocates for gender equality. Prior to UN Women, she was the Director of External Affairs and Policy, Africa, and part of the Corporate Strategy Office at Merck. Ms. Nyamayaro holds an MS in politics from the London School of Economics and Political Science. I want you to please join me in giving a very special welcome to our guest speaker, Ms. Elizabeth Nyamayaro.
Thank you, Karen. Good morning, everyone. What if I told you that there's a solution that could change many of the things that you thought possible? A solution that could make you happier and positively improve the relations in your life? What if that solution also had enormous economic benefits, from increasing your team's productivity to enhancing NASA's overall innovation? And what if that same solution could benefit the US economy, increasing GDP by $1.2 trillion, according to a McKinsey 2016 report? And what if those benefits were not just US-specific, but could bring $12 trillion to the global economy? And that same solution could also bring other societal benefits, from putting an end to one of the world's greatest inequalities, impacting more than half of the world's population, to addressing one of the leading killers of men in the US, which is suicide. That same solution could also decrease global poverty and end world hunger. The solution of which I'm speaking is the fundamental equality of women and men. Today I'm here to talk about how to create a social movement. And although it may not appear so on the surface, we're all in the same business, movement. Different kind of movement, but movement nonetheless. At NASA, you are moving our sensibilities and knowledge to the highest and furthest reaches of the universe, while at UN Women, the United Nations global entity on gender equality, we are moving towards greater acceptance of a long overdue concept that women and men are equal. Today, that's the kind of movement I'm going to be talking about, mobilizing people towards social progress. I should begin by stating an important point of clarification. Just as there's no consensus on the definition of a social movement, there is also no one way to go about creating a social movement. So the insights from today are not based on general observation of social movements at large, but rather from lessons learned from being on the front lines of the HeForShe movement. Let's go back to the beginning. HeForShe was launched on September 20th, 2014, when a young woman stood in front of a large audience at the United Nations to deliver a simple message.
Today, we are launching a campaign called HeForShe. I am reaching out to you because we need your help. We want to end gender inequality. And to do this, we need everyone involved. This is the first campaign of its kind at the UN. We want to try and galvanize as many men and boys as possible to be advocates for change.
That young woman is Emma Watson, British actor and UN Women Global Goodwill Ambassador. With that invitation, she ignited a momentous movement, galvanizing more than 100,000 men to the cause in just 3 days. Within a week after launching HeForShe, at least one man in every single country in the world had answered her call, creating more than 1.2 billion conversations on social media. And with that, the HeForShe movement was born. Technical issues. Okay. Like with any good strategy, that's all right. Okay. Like with any good strategy, HeForShe came into being by asking why. Why is it that despite the universal belief that all human beings are created equal, there continues to be disparity among genders? Why is it that despite concrete evidence that show that equal societies are good for families, for communities, for business, for government, and even for social development, there continues to be gender inequality? And according to a report from the World Economic Forum, it could take us at the current rate of progress 81 years to achieve gender equality and 118 years to achieve equal pay. By asking why, we realized that we needed to think differently. We needed to challenge the status quo. We needed to dismantle the notion that gender equality is a zero-sum game, that women win and men lose. This is not so. This is about creating better societies for everyone, one that creates more opportunities and benefits for everyone and all of society. We realize that a whole of society issue such as gender equality requires a whole of society solution. It's a new paradigm, but it's a better paradigm. This became our vision to create a solidarity movement for gender equality, HeForShe. Thus, the first important component to creating a social movement is to have a clear vision. Social movements that enjoy lasting success have a core purpose and core values that remain fixed while their strategies adapt to an ever-changing environment. Vision provides guidance on what to change and what to preserve in the moment of the evolution. The second component to building a social movement is to have a simple activation. Most successful social movements have a clear and simple call to action, and sometimes the name becomes the rallying call, eliciting an immediate response. Now, this is not an endorsement of any of these movements, but to illustrate a point, some of the movements that have been successful in the US include things such as same-sex marriage, Occupy Wall Street, Black Lives Matter, and Yes We Can. Equally with HeForShe, the call to action is simple. It's about he supporting she, about men and boys raising their hands to be counted. Initially, this seemed kind of counterintuitive. Surely you can't change a world by asking men to raise their hand. But we knew that this was a very complex issue with different social and cultural nuances. So the simple activation provided an entry point for men to join the movement. And through that, it inspired action that we had not even anticipated. For instance, one man in Africa started a husband school. He literally went around his village, handpicking the men that were abusive to their wives and committed to turn them into better husbands and fathers. In the Netherlands, a young man, recognizing that there continues to be a disparity in terms of funding for women and girls programming, organized a bikeathon and rode from his country of Netherlands across 2 continents and all the way to South Africa to raise funds for gender equality. In some cases, these were simple activations. such as men stepping up to share parental and household responsibilities. The men were finding solutions that were personal to them in their lives and in their own communities. Their equality stories became thought starters for other men and would inspire them to take further action. Which brings me to the third component about how to create a social movement. Responsive listening. Traditionally, organizations try to use people to move their organization forwards and often forget that people need to see the value and the direct benefit to them. Successful social movements look at how they can use the organization to move the entire community forward. With HeForShe, we knew that our role would need to be that of facilitators. And to be a good facilitator, we needed to be good listeners. So therefore, responsive listening became and has remained a core component of the movement, allowing key findings to help us inform the strategy without losing focus of our vision. One such key finding came just 2 weeks after the launch of HeForShe in the form of a letter from a young man here in the US. He shared with us a very powerful story about his upbringing, about being raised by a single mother in the Bronx, about the struggle that he faced to provide for his mother and his 5 siblings, which led him to a life of crime. One evening during a robbery, he accidentally shot the homeowner. And as the woman lied on the ground, taking a last breath, he stood there and he felt absolutely nothing. Because as a man, he wasn't allowed to show any emotion. He wasn't allowed to feel anything. Because as a young boy, his mother had told him that boys don't cry. And on the streets, his friend had told him to man up. And so the young boy ended up in prison. And then one afternoon, whilst watching television, he saw Emma Watson deliver a speech at the UN about the HeForShe initiative. And all of a sudden, something incredible happened. He was filled with emotion. And for the first time in his adult life, he broke down and cried. In his letter, he included an image of a bird flying out of a cage, a metaphor of how the speech had liberated him. And he wrote, "While I remain consumed with loneliness in my tiny prison cell, I feel free." His letter shifted our realization that HeForShe was not just about breaking barriers for women. It was about freeing all of us, giving us the freedom to be who we truly are, to be strong and emotional, to be vulnerable and real. By late 2015, there were more than 250 HeForShe student clubs that had emerged on college campuses, powered by the passion of the millennials to change the world. And so we took our responsive listening on the road, visiting college campuses in the UK and France. It was there that student activists would remind us that gender is no longer neatly divided into 2 categories, that the gender binary of male or female is an outdated idea that no longer reflects how millennials feel about themselves or those that they love. The students were seeing very clearly for the first time that inequality has a direct impact on all of us, no matter how we identify or express our gender. And so now HeForShe is not just about men. It's a radically inclusive movement that allows everyone to not only express this belief, but also to act on it in meaningful ways. And that's really one of the most challenging aspects of a social movement, how to translate the momentum of activism into tangible social change. We know that not all social movements result into change and impact, but the successful ones have one thing in common: they are impact-driven. The last component focuses on measurable results with key milestones to track towards progress. The gay rights movement, for instance, has focused on the key issue of same-sex marriage as a measurable milestone of progress. The civil rights movement and the women's rights movement both made voting rights an essential milestone in tracking towards progress. HeForShe is focusing on generating and creating impact at both the local, national level, and at both individual and institutional level. We have created partnerships with heads of states, with corporations, with universities to really move the needle on this issue of gender inequality. The commitments that we have seen in a handful of examples from our impact champions have been really remarkable. For instance, the government of Sweden and Iceland have all committed to ensure equal pay for all of their citizens by 2022. In fact, in Iceland, they will start auditing every company from the big corporation to the small company that employs 3 people, and then ensure certification towards equal pay, such that by 2022, companies working in Iceland will need to give their employees equal pay. In another example out of Africa, Malawi has committed to end child marriage, which is a big issue on the continent. And last year, we saw 330 child marriages being annulled, and 175 girls were sent back to school. On the corporate side, PwC, another HeForShe impact champion, as we call them, also committed to ensure that there is parity at the board level across PwC. And in the past 6 months, they've gone from having 20% of women to 45% of women. Twitter, another impact champion of ours, also recently announced a gender-neutral parental leave policy, giving all parents 20 weeks of paid leave. Let me talk about the universities. 2 very quick examples. University of Waterloo, which is Canada's leading engineering school, has committed to close the gap on STEM. And last year, and they will do this for the next 5 years, they introduced the first ever HeForShe scholarships, awarding 6 female students to study STEM on their campus. And of course, here at the University of Stony Brook, which is a leading public university in the US, they've also committed through their Masculinity Center, which is the only one in the US, to help us deconstruct and redefine the issues of masculinity. So as I end this talk about how to create a movement, I would like to turn back to your kind of movement and borrow a quote from somebody who told the world a little bit about that. Johannes Kepler is quoted as saying, "Truth is the daughter of time, and I feel no shame in being her midwife." Through Kepler as a midwife, time has taught us that the planet orbits the sun in an eclipse and not a circle. Through the midwifing of so many other social movements before HeForShe, including the women's rights movement, time has taught us about the power of individuals to create change and move humanity forward. So as you, the bright minds here at NASA, continue to unlock some of the secrets and truth of our universe, may we work together to midwife another great truth, the fundamental equality of women and men. Thank you. Yes, no, absolutely, yes.
Okay, so if you have some questions, we have a little bit of time, and we'll have mics, I believe, that will be ready. There they are. If you have a question, just raise your hand, and we'll get those started. Okay? Yes. Hello.
Oh, maybe you could just hear me better this way. Thank you so much for that talk. That was really beautiful. I'm really happy to hear about this movement. I had never heard of it before, so it's really great to bring it to Ames. One thing that I've been wondering about in terms of social movements in general, how do you invite other people who might feel ostracized or like they're part of the problem? How do you invite them and make them feel comfortable and willing to contribute to the solution?
one at a time? Well, thank you for your question. It's exactly the foundation of HeForShe, in fact. And to give you a quick background, this was not an easy initiative to launch. Initially, there was a lot of pushback, which I can respect and understand where it was coming from, because traditionally the issue of gender equality has often been associated with women. And it's been a movement for women, led by women. And it's also been interesting because sometimes guys don't even know that they have a gender. Because it's, you say gender and, oh, that's about women, it's got nothing to do with us. And so, so we realized that we needed to find a way that we could bring everybody together and really create a solidarity movement. So HeForShe was that way of bringing together men and women, and in fact all genders for that matter, to all rally around, which we think it's an important societal issue. It has nothing to do with women. It is really about social progress, and it's about human rights as well.
Okay. We have another question in the back.
At what point do you equate inequality to inequity?
A very important question, and something that we get often, because yes, there is the inequity, which is a really big issue, but given the global mandate of the UN, we are working in every single country in the world. And I think before we can even get to inequities, there are some very basic fundamental rights that are still not there. So with everything else that's going on, with limited resources, the biggest focus to address the issue of inequality, but of course inequity is something that we also look at, but maybe not at the scale that we're able to do the inequality piece first.
Yes, here.
Yeah, I have two questions. The first question has to do with an organization called Vital Voices. I suspect you're familiar with them.
Correct.
There are lots of movements like yours. Is there an attempt in the United Nations to bring these movements together?
Yes. So I had an interview actually last week, and a journalist asked me a question which seemed quite obvious to me, but obviously was not that obvious. And he said, it's fascinating that you have called HeForShe a people's movement. Why isn't it a UN movement? We would think you'd want to leverage the UN brand. And we said, actually, it is a people's movement because people create movements. And so certainly one of the things we're trying to do with HeForShe is that how do we almost remove the UN from the process and really make sure that it's about partnerships, and hence the impact champions that I spoke to you about. It's looking at how can we not duplicate efforts, but again, use our convening power as the UN to provide a platform that we can amplify other voices. So indeed, we are working with so many partners, and an important one to point out is Men Engage, which is the largest coalition of men organizations working on issues of gender equality. But you raise a fantastic point, and it's something that we're very conscious of, and this is why this is not a UN movement, it's a people's movement.
So my follow-up question is, if you consider Maslow's pyramid of needs, you're sort of up at the very top of Maslow's pyramid, looking at self-actualization and belonging and social structures. But all the evidence in the world now suggests that the foundation of that pyramid, which is physiological needs like food, water, energy, shelter, are all being really threatened by changes in climate and resource limitations. Are you working on this whole pyramid, or how does this system sort of fit together?
An important background for you, which is missing from my speech, is that HeForShe is an accelerator. It's an accelerator for UN Women's work, UN Women being the global entity on gender equality. It's an accelerator for the SDGs, which is the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And within the two arms that I mentioned to you, the mandate of UN Women is to really focus on the bottom, as you mentioned. We are in 90 country offices, and where we don't have an office, we work with our sister agencies like UNICEF and UNESCO and UNDP. But the basic work of UN Women is to make sure that we are focusing on the basic needs: education, healthcare. We focus on issues of women economic empowerment. We focus on issues of political participation and leadership. And the HeForShe as an accelerator is looking at how can we have, as I mentioned to you before, something that's more external facing, so that we can almost address this thing from the bottom up and top down approach.
Other questions?
Hi, I'm from the Women's Influence Network, so we're very glad that you're here and we're very happy. And so we'll dive into this probably more later at our 12:30 event, but we were hoping to bring this movement to NASA. So could you kind of talk about how we can help be impact champions and bring this into the NASA fold?
So this morning I had the honor to meet with your management, and I know that we have a meeting this afternoon to further explore. We are very keen as the UN to make sure this is not a one-off engagement. We look up to NASA as a pioneer of innovation and really making us see the impossible. And so we would very much love this to be a continued partnership that we can both learn from each other.
There was another question.
Hi, yes. Along the lines of that, now that we have partnerships that can make things move with more momentum, but as you start with a new social change, how do you deal with resistance or people who are not thinking it's the next obvious step towards social progress?
Yes. So this is, I think, the biggest thing that we realized with HeForShe was to be able to demonstrate impact and results. As I mentioned to you, the initial response was not positive because you had people saying, men don't really care about this issue. Why are you even engaging them? You had people that say, well, men are the problem. Then why are you even engaging them? And I think one of the things that we realized immediately was, OK, if we're going to do this, we need to be able to have measurable change and measurable impact. So the partnership that I mentioned to you, it's actually a partnership called, it's a pilot called Impact 10 by 10 by 10, where we have a partnership with 10 heads of states, 10 global CEOs, and 10 university presidents that have all come up with some really game-changing commitments in championing gender equality, not in the sense of here's what we're doing to advance it, but rather here's what we're going to do to actually get to the finishing line. And through this partnership, it's measurable. So Iceland, as I mentioned, is an example. It's measurable. The commitments are public. There's annual reporting and tracking of progress. And I think when people started to see, girls in Malawi going back to school, when people started to see, the opportunity to have equal pay or parental leave, I think that helped people to realize that this wasn't just an awareness thing, but we actually want to, we want to change the world, and we're doing something about that.
Yes, right here.
So when we start talking about impact and when we put numbers on it, like we want half of people on the board to be women, how do we combat the concept that maybe some of them are unqualified?
Yes, it's always a very tricky question because even at UN Women level, not HeForShe, but as the global entity, one of the things we often face is quotas or no quotas, right? Because you also don't want tokenism either, and I don't think women want that either. We don't want to be appointed out of tokenism. We want to be appointed because of our qualifications. So it's always a very interesting and delicate matter to manage. In some cases, we actually have to enforce quotas because nothing is going to happen otherwise. And then on the issue, the framing of UN Women is not that we just want women there, but we want qualified women. We want parity. It's not a zero-sum game either. We don't want more women than we want men. We want to create diverse teams of qualified individuals, right, to be able to progress.
And just sort of to add on to that, it's interesting, as part of the conversation, right? No one asked if the men on the board are qualified.
That's right. That's a good point.
Okay. We have time for a couple more questions. Yes.
Hi, my name is Kate Napier. That was a fantastic talk. I was wondering if the HeForShe movement has addressed the ways in which all major world religions contribute to the oppression of women through exclusion in leadership positions and oftentimes teachings that women should be submissive to men.
Yes, so currently, actually, in the Middle East, our country office secured funds from one of the member states, and they are carrying out a huge exercise on understanding the issue of religion and gender. But an important thing, though, to point out is that we want to do this in an inclusive manner. It's really to try and do this in an amicable versus antagonistic manner. So we are working as part of HeForShe with religious leaders at community level to help sensitize, but also to learn from them what some of the challenges are, so that we can do this in a proactive manner. You know, we can't, and this is why I often say, you know, we don't own the HeForShe movement because we will never know how to communicate to your community in a certain cultural context. So it's really important. The partnership thing is really key, that it's about empowering the local communities, religious leaders, the men in those communities, and of course the women in those communities, to all sit down and come up with the solutions that are relevant to their situation.
So I have a question. So I'll actually move into the light. So one of the things that you see, it's always easier to suggest or push change in other locations. It's usually in your family that it's a little harder to do, right? You could always teach, assign, direct, fund to do, but in your family, because you're doing it every day, it's hard to see and hard to change. How is this movement impacting the way the UN does its job? And do you see any movement within the UN?
Yes. So also with the HeForShe, I was telling the group that I met with earlier that with this Impact 10 by 10 by 10 initiative, one of the, in addition to these entities coming up with a game-changing commitment, they also agreed to transparency around reporting and its annual reporting. And I remember, you know, getting some of the global CEOs, and these are some of the biggest companies from McKinsey to Vodafone to Twitter to Barclays, etc. And there was people who said, well, they're never going to release their data. McKinsey had never released their data up until now. And we managed to get them this year in Davos. 1 year later, after implementing HeForShe, they reported their data on the sort of parity within the company. And with that push, this also gave us a leverage to then go to the Secretary General and say, if we are asking our partners to release their data, we also have to release their data. And yes, we did release our data. And it's still, again, it's not as great as it should be, but again, I think transparency is the starting point. You can't fix something unless you know how big the problem is. So with HeForShe, just in the past year, we've been able to get the UN to also release their data.
Awesome. Okay, I think we have time for a couple more questions. Yes.
So regarding the question you had, or the statement you made about quotas or non-quotas, doesn't the imposition of a quota sort of foster a spirit of inequality? Obviously, you have to do something to make things equal, but doesn't imposing a quota sort of foster this idea that these people need to be stood up for and that sort of thing, and then make people that are being supported by the quota feel unequal?
The executive director of UN Women has a favorite saying. She says, you know, certainly a woman can break the glass ceiling, but won't it be nice if someone just removed it so I don't have to hit my hands? I think it's the same thing with the issue of quotas, unfortunately, that, you know, in some cases you have to have I mean, we wish we didn't need the quotas, but sometimes you have to have the quotas, especially around political participation.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Hi, I'm Erica Rodriguez, also part of the WIN organization here at Ames. Thank you for a wonderful talk. I had two questions. You mentioned earlier in your presentation that the HeForShe campaign exceeded your expectations, and now that you've seen this huge movement, where do you see it in 1 year, in 5 years? And the second question is there feedback? Do you go back to these countries who have started this movement and see if they're really continuing the change that they said they were going to start?
Yes, so now the HeForShe, having started as this awareness 1 year initiative, now becoming a core component of the accelerator of the SDGs and UN Women, we are obviously, you know, tracking progress until the finishing line. Within the Impact 10 by 10 by 10, we've even gotten even ambitious. So the commitments that I mentioned to you, whether it be around equal pay, so we have 2 companies that are addressing, in addition to the 2 countries addressing issues of equal pay. We have an endpoint of 2020. We almost want to front load the activities so that we wait until 2030 to realize that we are still quite far from where we need to go. So there is the annual reporting, annual tracking. We meet with these impact champions, the heads of states, the CEOs, and the investor presidents on an annual basis. And in fact, September 20th, which is the second year anniversary of HeForShe, it's going to be the General Assembly at the UN, and we are launching the heads of states report as well as the university report. So there is like clear, measurable, trackable progress happening with that group. And then in terms of what was your second part? Did I answer the second part?
Yeah, you did. And then
yeah.
Where you personally see it going a year or 5 years?
Well, if I can boldly say this, we want to end gender inequality. And really, I mean, we are not stopping until that's done. But again, the more we can front load the work, the better it's going to be for everyone.
I think we have time for one more, at least, Jacob. Okay, yes.
Hello, my name's Alejandra, and I wanted to thank you very much for coming today at NASA Ames. And I wanted to know if you could give advice. There's a lot of interns here on how to advocate for the HeForShe campaign and gender equality globally. So what advice would you give us really quickly?
So the first, as a reminder again, I firmly believe, and we firmly believe, that people create movements. And so it's going to take all of us. And it can't be as daunting as it should be, because sometimes you sort of feel, well, where do I even start? And so we are trying to really make this as bite-sized as possible. I think the first thing is go to the HeForShe.org website, read some material. Within that website, we're sort of giving you some thought starters and ideas on what you can do to support gender equality. We've also identified sort of key priority issues that, you know, we think we need more work to be done on those areas, and also giving you ideas on how you can be part of this. But again, some of these things are very simple, and Jacob, you spoke about this. It all begins in the home, right? And we all have a responsibility. And I'm baffled when when women say, well, these men are just horrible men. And I think, well, they didn't just like emerge from a jungle somewhere, you know, just like raised by like animals or something. I mean, mothers also have a responsibility. You know, we are raising these sons, we're raising these daughters. And I think just having that awareness in the home, I mean, I remember, you know, I'm from Africa, so gender disparity has always been a part and parcel of my upbringing. But I even know now, living in the US, and I go to my friend's house, and, you know, they're supposed to be much more enlightened than perhaps I thought I was living in Africa, but you still have mothers saying, well, you know, don't play with your brother's toys, and the brother has trucks, you know, here's your doll for you, and really sort of creating this sort of inequality right off, or you know, the boys should stay out of the kitchen, let the girl cook. So I think really starting from that, and as young people, we obviously want your energy. There's more than 250 HeForShe clubs. Going back to your school, start a club, educate your fellow students, and sign up to the HeForShe movement. We still need more people.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And I'm just going to piggyback onto that. Yes. All of you Ames people out there, all of you interns, all of you folk who are here today, you've got some homework, right? Go check out the website, find out how to join. Start the conversation. Mm-hmm. You have to start it here. I totally agree with you. I have grandsons and granddaughters, and you would not believe the conversations we've had around the color pink. They're only 4, but they're very vocal about who should wear it and who shouldn't. And we're slowly but surely changing their minds. You can imagine, I'll bring you pictures of my grandsons in pink shirts and my granddaughters in blue boxers later. But we definitely want to start by having the conversation. And don't stop when the conversation gets uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right? Right?
Yes.
Push through. Have the conversation.
Yeah.
We are grateful. Thank you so much for coming today, and we invite you back.
Absolutely.
Right? So please, let's give her a wonderful, warm thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Elizabeth Nyamayaro. Thank you.